all of our participants in. Sorry for the little technical glitch at the beginning. And I'm sure if, you know what? Let me see here. But it looks like we've got the majority of our folks on now, our advisory committee members. Sarah, you think we've got most of your team on that we need for this?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay.
Let me look again.
I know there's so many. You have to really scroll down through.
Normal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely normal. That's what I'm saying.
The only ones not here are Jeff and Jonathan with Bleakley, but
Where is this? Here. Oh. Okay. Probably haven't been used since first.
Hey, Rocky.
Yes.
Dan here. A couple of members of the public said they couldn't access. Can you send that link to me real quick in the chat? And I'll go ahead and send it to them.
No problem.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Sarah, are we ready?
yeah, let's keep moving.
All right, well, this is really going to, and for those of you that participated last week, our advisory committee members, thank you. We got some good input from all of you. And Sarah, right before we get started, can you just give a brief update on how many folks we actually had participate in the online public comment for the first plan? That just a round number.
Yeah, we had a little over 50 people participate online in the last week. So
okay, that's great because they're giving some pretty detailed assessments there. Mm-hmm. So today we've got a second one to go over. I do not think it will be quite as long of a meeting as the previous one, because in the previous meeting we went over a lot of market detail that you know, frankly at this point is background information. So we'll just jump right into this, Sarah, if you want to lead us through. And and I will take care of, I'm actually seeing here in the background from Bleakley that they're trying to get on. So I will try to get them on as well while you're taking it away for us.
I'll let Tom kind of introduce us in the team first, and then I'll get going.
This is Tom Walsh with TSW. Thank you all for having us, and it looks like it's a great turnout for a Monday. We're very excited, as Andrew said, this is the second of 4 that we have, and we felt we got a really good response on the first round, and we really encourage you to give as much input and tell as many people about the project and go to the site as you can, because the more input we get, that helps. TSW is the lead firm on this. Sarah is the project manager leading it. We also have Allison and Ryan Snodgrass is on the team, and my partner Bill is on the team as well. We have Bleakley, the Bleakley advisory group with Jonathan and Jeff, and then we also have the engineering firm with Andrew on that, Long Engineering. So we have everybody's on there to answer any questions if those were to come up. But Sarah's going to take us through this first round of projects. So go ahead, Sarah.
All right, everyone. I will be talking for quite a while, but don't worry, we will break it up with some poll questions to get some feedback on some of these ideas we have. So we'll go through just some of the introduction with the site analyses, market study results, outreach, and then the site plans and next steps. So as a reminder, we have these 4 redevelopment sites. We went through Northridge last week, and that's where we had the input. This week, we're going to be looking at the River Springs Center. A reminder of what these concept plans are trying to accomplish. They are conceptual but feasible ideas that are models for redeveloping underutilized commercial centers, and kind of just show what the community preferences are for future redevelopment. It is not a zoning exercise in terms of we're not rewriting the zoning code. We're just making recommendations, and it's not a final design for all 4 of the sites. It's just, again, an idea for what could happen. So where we are in the process, we're halfway through the concept plan development. We have our 3 draft concepts for each site complete. We're having these series of advisory committee meetings and then staggered release to the public in order to get the feedback. And as we go through this, we're going to be revising them for another release later in October, early November, for feedback on the final iteration before we complete the report and present to council. Just a little quick overview on some of the market study results that Jeff and Jonathan went through in a lot of detail last week. The demand for office and retail is relatively limited without additional housing. There is a pretty significant demand for both owner-occupied and renter-occupied housing units. And adding these housing units within the North End could create additional retail space demand, but most of it will be any new commercial development will be the result of reorganizing space that's already built. Some of the overall feedback themes we've received from stakeholder interviews, the kickoff meetings, and our virtual pop-ups, and we had a question about this online, is a need for a mix of housing options that are attainable at many price points, a desire for parks, plazas, green space, and connected parks and trails throughout the North End, desire for mixed use with residential and some retail, and then keeping the building heights relatively low, no taller than 5 to 6 stories. So as a reminder, each site plan that we have for each site, we have 3 options. Some of them we venture into 4 with some slight modifications, but the first one is always based on the existing development code. The second one will have some minor changes in terms of height or unit count or uses or lot sizes. And then the third one doesn't take the development code into consideration at all. One key to success is changing North Roswell Road. We've said this at the last meeting as well, but just a reminder, doing these sites individually may not make much of a revitalization in the North End, but making Roswell Road a walkable, safe street for pedestrians, cars, cyclists will really help connect everything within the North End and make these sites more viable. There's, again, not much demand for retail, and that's changing even faster due to the pandemic that basically just accelerated trends that were already happening. There is a high demand for a variety of housing types at multiple price points, and each of our sites are designed differently based on the surrounding context. So what we saw at Northridge last week is not really what we're going to show today for River Springs, because the surrounding properties are very different. So we'll get into River Springs now. This is River Springs Center, which used to be Lohman's. It's about 10 acres. The current zoning is SX3, shopfront mixed use, which means there's a maximum of 3 stories building height. As of April, there were 24 retail tenants. The majority of the site is parking, and it's hidden from Roswell Road with the commercial properties up front, but those maybe could represent an opportunity for acquisition and kind of tying this site into Roswell Road. And then there are protected neighborhoods of single family homes on most sides of the site. So some of the assumptions, just to reorient you, we flip this on its side. So north is to the right here, and this is Roswell Road. This site, we believe, is better suited for residential uses because of the residential context around it. So some of our concepts don't even have any kind of retail recommended at all. And then some of them have very limited retail or office space. But we do see in each of the concepts that we have, these front out parcels could be redeveloped in a way that addresses both Roswell Road and any new development that happens here to become more of the neighborhood serving retail uses. And then also consistent in each of the concept plans is using this green space that's currently here on the north end of the site where there's stormwater detention ponds, making that a enhanced stormwater park that is accessed by both the neighborhoods and any kind of new development here. And then the other main thing is that if we do need to phase this project, we see the potential phasing line more towards the northern end of the site where that part could be demolished first, because that leaves about 2 relatively large parcels that could be redeveloped into something while the other side is transitioning. This first concept, option 1, takes the current zoning into consideration. So what that means for this design is that any building that is facing a street must have retail on the ground floor. And then anything above that can be multi-unit residences. So here we've used the existing access drives as ways to get into the site. We've widened this current drive aisle to become more of a street with some on-street parking, and then extended this access drive to go into the parking deck that serves the majority of the site. All of these buildings are a maximum of 3 stories with a step down in height towards the protected neighborhoods to the west and to the north. We maintain the 30-foot buffer that's required by zoning code. And we have some smaller green spaces interspersed throughout here, amenity spaces with the apartments, and then this civic green space upon entry here from the southern drive access. This concept also has about 340 residential units and about 32,000 square feet of commercial space, which could be offices, retail, restaurants, those kinds of things. The challenges of the current code that we have come up with while working on this is that requiring the ground floor commercial on any public street, or well, any street within the development, may lead to too much commercial space. And then the existing street width and design requirements within the development code limit the amount of developable land. The streets we currently have drawn are a bit smaller than what is required in the code. And then the 3-story buildings make it financially difficult to support a parking deck. So trying to fit all of those kind of uses in there within a small space, and then also trying to make a parking deck work, became a little more difficult. So I am going to do a poll here. Ideally, the advisory committee can vote. Just as a reminder for anyone not on the advisory committee that's in this meeting, all of these questions will be available online today, so you will also have your chance to vote and provide your feedback.
I would just ask that any staff on the call, just let the advisory committee vote here. This is to get their feedback, not from staff.
So the question is asking you to grade the concept plan that we just went through for how appropriate it is for the site.
I think I have 10 participants on today's call from the advisory committee, so that should be it.
Great. So looks like we got slightly above average. So I think in college, I don't think I would have been super happy with the C, but it's we'll take it for this. Okay, so now I think you can see the results. I'm not sure if you could before, but there we are. Okay. So the next option here, we're focusing more on missing middle housing. So we've removed any kind of parking deck structure here so that we can have a variety of housing types that meet different price points and meet different needs. So the last one, while it had all the multi-unit buildings, those are primarily just apartments or condos. So these, we have single family detached homes over here on the northern end. We have some townhomes of various sizes throughout here. We have a group here of townhomes over flats that are kind of like duplexes. There's a townhome over an apartment unit. And then we have some small multifamily buildings over here on the southern end of the site with about 6 units each. So the parking for each of these townhomes and the single family homes, they're all self-parked. And then some of the streets have some on-street parking. And then we have some parking lots, small parking lots to serve the multifamily buildings. This site has a much smaller unit count. We have about 150 units here, but there are more of a variety here. It starts to feel more like a residential area, and there's no retail here aside from the opportunity for potential redevelopment here that could face into this redevelopment. However, in order to make this concept work, because it currently doesn't with the code, we could potentially rezone to an existing designation, but we would still need to recommend lot size reductions for multi-unit buildings, townhomes, and single-family detached units. And we would still need to reduce the street width and design requirements. I will set up the poll now for this one, I think. Looks like we had the most people grade it with a B, but a few people felt that it doesn't fit the area at all. Okay. So this next one kind of merges ideas from both of the previous that we've had. We still have a larger multi-unit building with a parking deck over here on the northern end, some townhomes in here, some live work units, smaller apartment buildings that are about 6 units each. That same green space at the terminus of the Southern Drive, surrounded by retail and office uses, and then a multi-unit over office and parking that faces Hightower. One thing to note about the multi-unit building is that it's 5 stories here, and then it steps down to 3 stories in the back and towards the protected neighborhoods. But in order to make all of this work financially, we needed to create this larger building. And this site has about 380 units on it, but there's more of a variety here than on the first one. To make this one work, again, we could potentially rezone to an existing designation. We could recommend adjustments to the SX zoning designation to allow standalone multi-unit buildings that don't require retail on the first floor. We would need to have slightly taller buildings up to 5 stories, still with that step down towards the protected neighborhood. And then we would, again, need to reduce the street width and design requirements. And then another factor that made this plan a little bit harder is that the code currently requires steel and concrete construction on buildings taller than 3 stories, which would make this a little more expensive to build, which would then offset costs onto whoever is trying to live there. Okay. Looks like this one received more of an average rating, and we have 5 people that felt like it was kind of okay with a B, and then a few people with C's and D's. So we'll kind of discuss those later. And then our final option, which is 3B, which was that last one, everything here in the middle and on the southern end is the same, but we replaced the larger multi-unit building with some townhomes and small single-family detached houses that overlook this enhanced stormwater park, some smaller green spaces here in front of these townhomes, another green space here fronted by some more townhomes, and these townhomes would all be different sizes to hit different price points. And you know, again, we have this opportunity for commercial development here, and then this one is about 160 units. And I will open up the poll on this one. Okay, this one received the most favorable results of all of them. And hopefully in our discussion, we can start to distinguish what made each of these different in terms of your responses. Okay, and I forgot to go through this part before we did the poll, but again, we would need to potentially rezone, reduce lot sizes for multi-units, townhomes, and single-family detached units, and then reduce the street width and design requirements in order to fit enough units in here. So now I have some more generalized poll questions. We have 3 of them. The first one is, do you agree with making this site predominantly residential? Okay. Looks like the majority say yes, and a couple who are against it or not sure. The next one is, do you agree with adding mixed-use development on this site? Mixed use being not necessarily only a mix of housing, but a mix of retail, office, and housing. Okay, looks like we had overwhelming majority / everyone agreeing that yes, mixed use development is most appropriate here. And then the final question is, do you agree with allowing taller buildings on this site up to 5 stories to accommodate more housing units and attainable housing? Looks like the majority said yes, but again, we have a few that are against it and 1 person who is not sure. Okay, so the next steps for this is that we will send the advisory committee the presentation slides, and you all can provide your feedback either via comments on the PDF or via Social Pinpoint, which is launched today with for River Springs. And then we're releasing those public input activities weekly for the next 3 weeks, counting today. So we have, we just had this meeting. We'll have one next Monday. Actually, I have these dates a little bit wrong. So we are currently here on the 31st with River Springs. September 8th will be North River, and then we will have September 14th for North Springs. Sorry about the mistake on that. And so the public input schedule here, today through Sunday at midnight, we will have River Springs available for feedback from next Monday the 7th through Sunday the 13th, we'll have North River, and then Monday the 14th through September 20th with North Springs. So now we can open it up for questions and answers that have come through either in the Q&A or we can talk about some of those polling questions that we've had.
So I would just encourage, general comments from the advisory committee. I saw some interesting dichotomies there, especially between numbers 3A and 3B that I thought were kind of interesting, but I would love to just, hear your overall thoughts, verbal thoughts on what you thought about the 3 plans.
Sarah, bring up those 4 plans so that everybody can see the plans.
This is Rhonda.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
I like the mix of housing. Was 3A, did 3A, what kind of non-housing elements did that have? Is that office on the southern end?
Yes, we have some office here with the blue and then some retail here with the dark red. And then over here, we have office on the first floor of this building.
Okay, and that stays with the 3B option too. I like the fact that there is a mix of housing, and obviously, finding that missing middle and attainable / affordable housing that's going to be the magic in the mix with respect to how any developer is going to be able to make this happen without, as an unknown for cost of property, as an unknown for, collaboration, cooperation with the existing property owner, if that's an option. We're kind of conceptually, I like both of those plans just because there is such a fantastic mix of housing. My business brain is grappling with this for more than one reason. And I guess I wanted to dial back all the way to the beginning when you presented the thought process behind what's north of the site and whether or not that's an amenity that you can control. It sounds great, and I would love it just because, we all think about Old Fourth Ward. We think about their bioretention being adjacent to, isn't that across the street from Pond City Market? And it's an amenity unto itself. It doesn't really even need anything else around it because it is such a huge draw for the community. But is there a thought process, and I guess my question is there a thought process behind control on that amenity?
In terms of, right now it's currently owned by the Hunt Cliff HOA, so there would need to be some land acquisition there or some kind of an agreement. So I imagine that, if the developer paid for building it out, then that might need to be maintained there, but it's also contingent upon if the HOA would even allow it to happen.
Right. And that's kind of the stumbling block that kind of appeared in my head. And the only reason I bring it up is because I don't want everyone's opinion to be swayed by it's a great amenity and that would be nice and it would be great and single family overlooking that would be beautiful, or even a 5-story building having that as their quote unquote view would be great, but I think it's not a controllable that you could use as something that would sway your opinion about whether you like or dislike those particular plans. I don't want to throw a wrench in the gears, but my logic brain says think about that with respect to whether or not that's even achievable.
I think that's a good point. This is Andrea speaking. I think that's a good point, Rhonda. I think all of these scenarios that they have presented here, I mean, they talked about the possibility of having that amenity, but I think you could do all of these without that amenity is the
Agreed.
assumption.
Agreed. And thank you for making it a little bit more palatable. I didn't mean to, like I said, throw a big wrench in the gears, but I agree with respect to the way it's laid out, and you know the way it flows. I like 3A and 3B.
Okay, thanks. Rhonda's muted herself, so does someone else want to speak up?
There's 2 questions in the chat that you all might want to look at.
I don't think I'm seeing them, Tom. They're not showing up for me. Would you read
Okay,
them out
well,
loud for us?
Yeah, one of them is from Jane Green, I guess. Is there a reason buildings can only be 3 stories? I guess that was relative to the first one, Sarah.
Yes, the current zoning code has a maximum of 3 stories for the site.
And then the second one was, when you mentioned street width reduction, is that within the development?
Yes, it would be. So currently the development code requires more like 80 to 90 feet for a street with all of the car lanes and sidewalks and all of that. So what we're saying is we have smaller streets proposed in here that are more neighborhood scale, and we would need to have that be allowed within the development code.
So you reduce the right-of-ways to like 50-foot right-of-ways, right?
Some of them we have, yeah, like 40. The widest we have is 70 that has the back end angled parking. But yeah, somewhere between 40 and 70.
And Sarah, the reason you all did that was just as a matter of trying to put more housing on the site, just trying to put more units on the site.
Correct. And,
Okay.
you know, wider right of ways typically need, you know, larger buildings and everything to make the scale feel right. And the smaller streets allow more units in there and also feel more appropriate for smaller single family or townhome developments.
Good questions. Anybody else want to talk about how you love something or you hate something?
I have a question. This is Tom to the members. You know, one of them got a lot of good positive votes, but is there anything out there that they see that would be the perfect plan that they imagine would make it even better and stronger than what we're showing right now?
Does anyone know how this kind of site, this particular site, obviously it's long and narrow. Has anyone taken a look at, and I hate to throw this up as an example because I haven't actually physically been on the property, but does anyone have an opportunity to go up and look at Alpharetta, look at their new, it's on the east side of the road. I know they've got some satellite buildings that are restaurants. Do we have an example of something that we think or know is working? It's got to be pre-pandemic or was working, and how it compares to this site with respect to something that's executable. Is there any place where you've looked at an example that says, hey, there's common green space, there's restaurants, there's multifamily, you know, on one portion of the site or just off one portion of the site? Is there any sort of examples that you guys have found out there that might be similar to what we're dealing with?
Glenwood Park in Atlanta was built based on some of these concepts. If you're familiar with Glenwood Park.
I'm not, but I'm going to get familiar with it. Okay. Is there a common green space?
Oh, yes. There's
So-
multiple. Yeah.
Right. Okay. How big?
Well, the whole site is 30 acres.
And the green space?
One of them's probably about 2 acres. and some detention system and a park at the same time.
Okay. I'm just looking at scale. What's the acreage here? 12?
Yes, so this would be a portion of what that might have been like. I mean, you can take Glenwood Park and look at certain pieces of it, and it fits within the context of especially option 2 or 3B.
Okay. Just thinking of scale, you'd want to look at 2/3 to 4/5 of an acre of green space if you put it on the same scale of 2 acres to 30 acres based on what Glenwood Park has. How big are any of those green spaces that I'm seeing on 2 or 3B?
Well, proportionally, they would fit very nicely with the scale of this development, those green spaces that Sarah developed. One of the things we did do is with that green space that is off to the east is a fairly large, and although it's not ours, it looks like it's there into perpetuity. So, you know, if that could be connected up, that would be a nice add to it, and it could be used. If not, then this plans can survive without that. But if you were to go to, again, Glenwood, you see small spaces like this, green spaces throughout the development.
And the code does require about 10% green space, which would be about an acre. It's just kind of divided. So these are probably, you know, between 1/4 and 1/2 an acre, maybe even smaller than that for some of the green spaces, like these over here, these smaller ones. And then I would also say option 2 doesn't have the retail and office component, but the site that we used as more inspiration for this one is Manchester, off of Chester Bridge area, which has kind of this mix of housing types.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard for me to separate my business brain from these concepts when you start talking about density and you start talking about what can fit and whether or not green space would have to be sacrificed in order to be able to execute. And again, this is, you know, just kind of my business brain talking. But the other thing I think that could be something to think about, particularly with even option 1 or option 3A, and I'm going to ask this question: the white box is parking deck?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Put a green space on top of that parking deck.
Mm-hmm.
Take advantage of anything that's flat that you could potentially put green space on. I know they're doing that. There's soccer fields on top of MARTA parking decks now. There's soccer fields on top of all kinds of parking decks. A multi-use recreational field on top of a parking deck would be a fantastic little amenity if it, as long as you can meet the parking minimums that are required. That obviously would be something to think about when you start playing around with what the use is of a piece of flat space. You know, and what's along the frontage there, obviously the control factor is tough, and understanding whether or not there'd be a willing participation in order to redevelop those sites up front.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough question. Again, my business brain is going beyond just looking at, you know, what's here and just thinking conceptually high level. You know, what can work. You know, you got to put big numbers on these sites for Sandy Springs prices. Let's call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it difficult to conceptualize some of this stuff and feel like that it would work.
Right.
Hey, Sarah, we had a good question in the chat box, and I think it's actually relevant for this site as well as the others. So can we have someone on the team, maybe the Bleakley team, talk about how you approached price points here, and how we might consider housing affordability in this and other sites around the city? I mean, at this point in time, when you're putting these plans together, in general terms, these are financially feasible for a developer to do at current market rates. Is that correct?
Well, that's a complicated question, Andrea.
That's why I'm having you answer it, Jonathan.
Yes, so as we are doing this talk right now, I'm actually chatting on my other screen with my main analyst putting together these pro formas. So what we are doing is looking for each of these scenarios. You know, we have 4 sites and we have 3 or 4 scenarios on each site. So that's about 12 to 14 different scenarios. And so we're looking at when you take all the retail, all the owner home, all the rental home, all the parking costs, when you crunch the numbers and crunch the finances, does it work or does it not work? So that is the first question there, that how much density and price points do you have to get in to make this work? Now, when we get to affordability, that is a complicated, extra, super complicated question. So one of the things is that a lot of times when we talk about this, we tend to say, well, what price point are these housing units or these apartments going to be offered at? And that's kind of not an understanding about how market rate real estate economics work. If we go through a straightforward market approach to this, whoever builds it will build it, and then they will get as much as they can out of these units. So based on the current model of what market rates are, we think that if these went for market pricing, that the townhomes would go for about $450,000 to $650,000, depending on size. We think an apartment would probably rent for about $1,500, $1,600 a month. So the question is that comes up to say, well, that's way above what workforce housing can afford to pay. That's way above what affordable housing can afford to pay. So the next question is, well, if we make them affordable, what price do we offer it? And that is a super question, difficult question, because the way we make affordability happen is not by sitting there in our big Game of Thrones chair with all the swords behind us saying, I will decree that the price point of this will be, you know, $1,200 or $900 or $800. That there has to be some sort of program, some sort of funding mechanism, some sort of subsidy associated with that to say, go between the developer, the residents, and the public sector to say, based on this system that we're setting up of regulations and incentives and carrots and sticks, this is what the price is going to end up being. In that case, if you have a well thought out program that can set a certain price based on area median income, then that's how you set the price. But you can't come into this from a design phase and say, what is the retail or what is the apartment price point going to be for affordable units, unless you have an associated public policy and process to go with that. And so the city is engaging right now in a housing study that hopefully is going to answer some of those. But what we can do in this exercise is we are looking at these at a market rate scenario, and then we're going to crunch the numbers again at an affordable scenario. And for that question, we are going to come up with a sort of hypothetical affordable policy. And that's what I wanted you to ask you right now, because that came up. So one thing that we need to be clear of is just in terms of thinking about this, we already have, each of these is a very complicated spreadsheet with 100,000 numbers in it. We already have that for 14 sites based on market level. What we would like to do is pick one hypothetical affordable scenario and run that same affordable scenario for 14 times. So when we talk about it, we've got a similar basis across site. What we typically pick for this is we say, what if there was some sort of policy that called for, what we usually use is, what if 20% of the units had to be affordable at 80% area median income? Now that's kind of an arbitrary thing we pick, but we pick it because it's something that's easy for everybody in the conversation to wrap their brains about. Then we run the numbers based on that requirement, and we look at what is the difference between a totally market rate development versus one that has this requirement of 20% affordability at 80% AMI. From that point, we can find out what is the per unit gap in housing finance that needs to be made up to make that feasible. Now, the trick is, if someone, the city or HUD or whoever comes in and says, we are requiring that 20% of these units be affordable, and if all there is right there is a requirement, then what's going to end up happening is not that you automatically get all those units, that it'll be that much harder for somebody to redevelop this property because they're going to make up all that cost difference. The costs versus revenues change a lot. So the question is, if one puts on a affordability requirement that is not balanced by some sort of other subsidy or something to make up the numbers, what you end up with is people just not coming to the table saying, I can't make the deal work with that requirement. So thanks, have a good day. I'm going to go do something in Dunwoody. So I just picked Dunwoody at random. Doesn't mean anything.
You're not picking on Dunwoody.
Right. So that is where the affordability gap comes from. You can't just march in and say, what are you going to set the prices at? The market is going to set the prices. So if you want to cap the prices at a certain level, then that money needs to be made up somewhere, whether it's from the developer, from the land purchase, or from a subsidy, or what. Somehow that has to wash through the system, or else we get nothing. I hope that answers the question, Andrea. Or
Yeah, well, it did answer a part of the question in my mind. And we'll have to ask the advisory committee members here. But again, from an underlying assumption standpoint of what these options are right here, we haven't taken into account really anything other than these, the properties here in general terms would be market rate, whatever they are.
Right. And so
Okay.
as we're talking, I just looked up the pricing from HUD that's useful in the Atlanta market. And so right now, the market rate for a small new townhome in Sandy Springs is $450,000. If you look at the HUD guidelines for what should somebody be able to afford at 80% of area median income for a 2-bedroom townhome, it's $178,800. So we have a gap already of $262,000. So what market rate is offering is more than twice as much as what 80% should be able to afford.
Jonathan, what happened if you had instead of a larger townhouse, you had like 1,100 square foot townhouse? That would certainly bring the cost of the townhouse down considerably. And would it get it within that range though?
I don't know.
We're designing townhouses that are
Yeah.
attainable within that, and we're designing single family detached that are only 1,200 square feet.
Right. So
And so-
we could value engineer our way out of this, but we're not going to value engineer a townhome down from 650 down to 180, by making it smaller, putting in Formica countertop.
I didn't know that. No, you don't. That's not what you do. What you do is if 450, what I would look at is what is the square foot to get 450,000 square. What was that per square foot unit that you're using for your analysis? And can you make a smaller townhouse at that same square footage price and get it in within reason?
You maybe could. We don't have many case studies of that in Sandy Springs at this point to measure against, but that is theoretically possible. But again, I don't think you're going to get down to $178,000. So there is going to be some sort of financial gap to make up in this 20% affordable scenario.
Okay. All right. So I think that the advisory committee members, even if you are at this point in time when they're reviewing options, what they should be reviewing the options for is, how do they like it in terms of how it fits in with the neighborhood context and how does it feel, not necessarily a price point for a particular type of housing.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. To be clear, the price point is not something that we can say from the planning or administrative level. That's something that the market decides unless there's some mechanism in place that sets it through a housing policy.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, this is Derek Laurie. Is the Waffle House and Sandy Springs Diner and Christian Brothers, are those all separate parcels?
Yes.
They're separate amongst themselves as well?
I think they're all, each one is its own parcel, yes.
We are separated from the plaza.
Yes.
Mhm.
They're 4 individual parcels.
Correct.
Any other members want to chime in? Okay. All right, well, there will still be opportunity for you to provide additional input. Again, as Sarah talked about, if we're going to send out some stuff to you, and you're welcome to print things out or to make comments on it electronically and send it back to us. I do highly encourage you to continue to encourage your neighbors and folks out in the community to get online and give their comments. As Sarah pointed out, for the first round, we had about 50 surveys filled out. We had many more that actually viewed the site plans, but it's most helpful to us if people will actually comment. So definitely please encourage folks to still do that, and the polls will be open for a week to do that.
Hey, Andrea.
Yes, Ken.
Hey, this is Ken. I was on mute, sorry. So I do have a question or maybe a comment. So at the last meeting, it was stated that none of this is really going to be possible unless the character of Roswell Road itself changes. And I think that as I've been looking at this today, I've been looking at it through two lenses. One is if Roswell Road stays the same and we have some of this development, versus if Roswell Road changes, there's median, it's more walkable. I think that any of these options become a lot more exciting in the context of a changed Roswell Road. And I think that as we move forward and look at all of these different options, we need to keep that in mind, because I think that that's going to really change the game for all of this. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Good, thank you, Ken. Anybody else? Okay, well, I guess Sarah, if we're finishing up here, we can go ahead and probably wrap up. You guys will receive an email with this information that you can comment on, and again, encourage your folks to make their comments on the online public comment forum. The other thing I want to remind you, if you didn't remember, next Monday is actually Labor Day, so we're not getting together on Monday. We're actually having this meeting next Tuesday at the same time, 4 p.m., to go over the third one, which I believe is North River Shopping Center.
Correct.
So that's exciting. That's going to be a totally different and new concept, because again, a little different area. Each one of these is very individual. You saw some things last week that you didn't necessarily see here, so it'll be exciting to see a third round of these. And if you have any comments, please just email us and let us know. Thanks for getting on the call, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for everybody participating.
Thanks.
Thank you.